Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Pleased to meet you. I am Yamamoto of Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Today, we are going to have a new subject for China Observer. I am going to be in charge instead of Kohara. Ladies and gentlemen, until now at China Observer, we were focusing on China, and we conducted our analysis, which was shared with all of you. This time round, we are going to redesign the contents. Recently, we know the Taiwan contingency-related issue, China-Taiwan issues. There are various issues arising, and I'm sure that you are all interested in these affairs. So at China Observer, we will look into China-Taiwan issue, Taiwan Strait issue. We have to know Taiwan, not only about China. We have to know Taiwan. We have to deepen our understanding. So going forward, we will have a discussion more focusing on Taiwan affairs. So, at China Observer, as the first event of the program, we have asked Professor Rira Momma, who is the professor of Institute of World Affairs of Takushoku University. Welcome to our program. Professor Momma served as a local expert both in Beijing and Taipei. And after that, he joined the Defense Research Institute of the Defense Ministry. He was the general manager, director of the Research Institute on China, and he joined the Takushoku University this spring. So, Professor Momma, with this experience, knows much about PLA, but not only that, he is well versed with the military capability of Taiwan forces. So in Japan, it is very rare to have an expert both versed on Chinese affairs and Taiwan affairs. He is really an expert. So today, he has written an article is regarding the possible approach to uninhabited and inhabited islands of Taiwan. What will be the approach of China regarding those islands? So he will make a brief introduction of that, and then he will talk about the military capability of Taiwan. So Professor Momma, can you start with that? So based upon your article to China Observer, I would like you to briefly introduce what you have worked. Originally, up until 2027, I am of the view that the PLA will make an aggression to Taiwan. People talk about that, but I don't think so. I don't subscribe to that theory. But we have to make preparations about various approaches. So that is why I wrote this article. I have taken up two patterns. The first one is in uninhabited islands. PLA will make an aggression to those unmanned islands. Another approach is that regarding islands with residents, ordinary civilians, the PLA make an approach to such islands. So I have conducted analysis regarding that. What are the uninhabited islands of Taiwan? Regarding Taiwan, we know that we don't have much knowledge, so can you talk about it? For example, well-known island would be this. In South China Sea, there is a Spratly Islands, and there is a Taiping Island, and that is where the biggest island in Spratly Islands. And then in South China Sea, northern part of that, there is Supras Islands. It is a coral reef. It is an island made of coral reef. So these are two islands, Pratas Islands and Taiping Islands. They are approached by the coast guards of Chinese government. The Taipei Coast Guard's people live there, and no civilians live there. So, uninhabited islands attacked by China. Regarding that possibility, talking from the capability of PLA, those islands can be captured rather easily thinking of the capability of PLA. The ways of approach would be that from the mainland of China, the short-haul ballistic missiles and cruising missiles would be launched, and it will be made with saturation attack. The islands are small, and what is protected by not the military, but it is a Coast Guard organization of Taiwan. Therefore, in 2-3 days, islands can be completely captured by PLA. That is my analysis. So, uninhabited islands, they are guarded not by the Taiwan military, but the Coast Guard of Taiwan. So the Coast Guard of Taiwan is protecting those islands, yes. And then the naval brigade is also manning that island, but in terms of the capability, it is very small. All right. So these are the targets. Now, why China would target those islands? Let me talk about it. After all, PLA of China, the greatest worry for is the involvement and intervention by the United States. If U.S. In 2-3 days, where U.S. will have no time to get involved, if they can occupy those islands, there is no contest, there is no conflict, there is no room for U.S. to come to those islands. So that is the desirable format for China to capture those islands. I think that is the calculation of China. Reversing the topic, once it is occupied, then it is an uninhabited island. Therefore, there are no residents, Taiwanese people. So they could dare say that U.S. will not come to recapture the island. That is the calculation of China. That is the calculation of China. Yes, exactly, as you say. Viewed from China, Spratly Islands, there are man-made islands, 7 places. It is the success story of China So the same thing could be done in the Pratas Islands. That could be done. At that time, reclamation of the land was made, and then the international community became very suspicious, and they were critical against the Chinese moves. However, beyond that, nothing happened from the international community. So as far as China is concerned, just like that, uninhabited islands can be occupied by China, but there could be no more action from the international community.
So that's one scenario. That would be the advantage from the Chinese side to attack unmanned island. On the other hand, attack on manned island is another approach that I am suggesting. When the island is manned, the approach taken would become different. First, there are civilians. If there are several civilians residing, if you launch a missile attack against such target, there could be casualties, a huge amount of casualties amongst the civilians. And today, with a social network, those people who have been killed, such video and photos will be spread instantaneously all over the world. And that would be a huge damage for the Chinese side. And therefore, they would like to minimize such kind of negative damage. So, as I mentioned in the article, I mentioned cognitive attack. But when you say cognitive attack, I fail to really understand what it means. Can you briefly explain what cognitive attack means? Yes. China would use propaganda and against the people who reside there or the military authorities. They would try to manipulate psychologically so that they would tilt towards the People's Liberation Army. They would try to control their minds and to achieve their original objective. I see. In other words, in the first half, your scenario was occupied by use of force. So in the second scenario, there would not be any use of force. Is that correct? Yes. The key is manned island. There are the residents. And even if you fight against China, you can't win. And if you cooperate with China, you would have a better life. So you would try to persuade the people that way. So Baso or Manzu and Kemon Island, would those be the islands that would be the target? Yes. Dr. Yamamoto, you mentioned Kemon and Mazu Islands. These islands, the distance is closer from the mainland coastal place than the Taiwan mainland. So what could happen? The people who reside there have a certain mentality that are closer to the mainland Chinese. And therefore, because they are closer to the mainland China, that proximity is felt in the mindset. So they might be psychologically feeling closer to mainland China than Taiwan. So from the residents of Quemoy and Mazu, integrating with China may not be such a big thing in terms of psychological bar. So rather than liberating them from use of force, you think that they may use cognitive attack using propaganda to convince them. And for the residents, they would be safe, so that would be to the advantage of China itself. Right. Regarding Taiwan, be it Japan or be it the United States, both China and Taiwan talking in peaceful atmosphere and deciding on the future, that is their hope of Japan or use without use of force. For example, the municipalities of the Kemon Island or the legislature of the Quemoy Island, if the residents all say, yes, we will become part of China, there could be some objections from Taiwan, but it would be peaceful and there would be no trigger for American intervention. So Quemoy, Mazu Island could be a target of such cognitive attack. Thank you very much. Rather than mainland Taiwan, remote manned island would become the target. So cognitive attack would be better because then there would be no intervention by the United States. That's the analysis of China. Professor, you talked about the possible approaches to be taken by China. But even then, there would be the counterpart. So we tend to be preoccupied by what China could do. But if they do that, if they do this, Taiwan could push back. So in the second half of this session, I would like to ask you those questions. Taiwan forces, Taiwan's military capability, we shouldn't underestimate. That is my take. What about you, Professor Momma? Right, the Taiwan forces, 215,000. And that's the registered number, but the actual force is less than 200,000. The possibility of a PLA attack is in the scenario, and Taiwan forces are preparing themselves to be prepared for such possible attack. Specifically, in what way is Taiwan trying to defend itself? Can you briefly explain how they are trying to defend itself? There are only 13 countries with whom they have diplomatic ties. They are all small countries, and they would not be counterparts for any military alliance. So Taiwan wants to rely on itself to defend its own nation, and that's the attitude they are taking. Having said so, however, recently China's military pressure is on the rise, and under such circumstances, the Taiwan side have taken a few measures in response. First, extend the mandatory service time. So they have the drafting system in Taiwan. Yes. Originally, they did have the drafting system, but thereafter, they shortened the period. And under President Tsai, they suspended drafting and 16-week military training was imposed. So 16 weeks military training. I was with the self-defense force previously, but that would be enough time only to learn the very, very basics. Personal action, right? Yes, that's correct.
So, in terms of military force, 16-week is not something that you can expect greatly. However, Chinese military pressure is mounting. So President Tsai's administration decided that military service for 1 year would be revived. So instead of 16 weeks to 1 year, it's a big leap forward. Yes, there was a strong opposition, of course. You are drafted for 1 year. So there was a strong resistance in a certain amount. But overall, because considering the Chinese military pressure, that is not something that you can't avoid. So 1 year military service, extension to 1 year. So those people, incumbent officers, military people, the number of people will increase serving incumbent. So the Taiwanese forces would be strengthened. I think that is the primary objective. And another thing that Taiwan tried to devise is the reserve system. They wanted to improve upon the system of reserve system. The reserve system. Well, they had a good number of people, like 1 million or so people. However, but they were not in a position to be well utilized. That was the concept of Tsai administration. The people in reserve. It is the self-defense force officials in reserve. So you experience several years actually serving, and then you go back to the society in general, and they are called in reserve. If anything happens, they will come back as a military personnel. Is that the image? Yes, exactly, that is the image. So they would be able to come back in time of contingency, and that they are well fit to fight against any adversaries. So that is the strengthening that they wanted to have from the January of 2022. They began such measures. I said 1 million strong servicemen in reserve, I said. But over many years, they continued the drafting system, and they were drafted. So they will be transformed into service in reserve. So they have a good number of people. For Taiwan, it is an asset. I think you can think of as a military asset. Thank you very much. Now then, we don't have the diplomatic relations, but the Taiwan and U.S. have a very close relationship, although they do not have official diplomatic relations. The Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan very recently. So in normal time, in terms of defense, what is the cooperation done between U.S. and Taiwan? What has become clear recently is that in the mainland of Taiwan, the Army of the United States or the Marine of the United States, these people are providing training to Taiwanese military people. It has become very clear. Other than that, utilizing mainland of the United States, using that as a stage, Taiwan military people are dispatched there, and with the state militia of the United States, they are jointly trained. So that is the reality which is happening. Now, the state militia, in normal times, these people are protecting the law and order, and sometimes they will act in the time of disaster relief. But in the time of contingency, together with the federal force of the United States, they will combat. Yes. Yes. In terms of training, the relationship has become very close between the Tsai administration and the U.S. Other than that, in recent times, In terms of weapon, from the US to Taiwan, the sales of weaponry, it has become very rich in content. For example, there was a Russian invasion to Ukraine. So in places like that, what is focused is the Stinger, the portable missile, or anti-tank missiles, Javelin. So those were becoming the interested items. So F-16, CD, 66 airplanes were sold to Taiwan. On ground, NYT 108 tanks were sold to Taiwan. And other than that, HIMARS that we hear often in Ukraine warfare, they were sold to Taiwan. Thank you very much. Now, last point I would like to ask you is this. In the time of contingency, as you said at the outset, China PLA could make an approach and invade Taiwan. So in the time of real contingency, Taiwan, what is the expectation and hopes that Taiwan has regarding U.S.? I said that Taiwan wants to defend herself with her own capability, making efforts to that end. But as a matter of reality, to the extent possible, Taiwanese forces can endure as long as possible, during which time White House will make a decision regarding defending Taiwan, and they will get involved in the Taiwanese contingency. Until that time, they want to endure and they want to fight back so that they are not capitulating. So until that time, they will have the cooperation with the United States, and they will maintain and they will continue to fight. I think that is what they envisage.
Professor Momma, I ask based upon your intuition. You've talked about the military forces of Taiwan, their actual capability, and that compared with what they need to endure until U.S. comes to help. Do you think that they are already equipped with such capability? Well, China is going to do saturation attack through missile and cyber. Through saturation missile attack, first, Taiwan forces will seek for an opportunity to fight back by preserving their capability, and then when they judge that the timing is right, then they will launch the counter-strike. Will that be 2 weeks or 1 month? Approximately such timing. They should persist and endure, and then during that period, U.S. forces will arrive. That's their idea. So for Taiwan forces, they have to endure for 1 or 2 months, and they are making efforts to be equipped with such capability. That is how I judge the situation. And I think if it's 1 month, I think they will endure. Thank you very much. To talk about China's approach vis-a-vis Taiwan, especially vis-a-vis manned island versus unmanned island, approaches that they made to remote islands. On the other hand, Taiwan forces that is assumed to have the endurance capability, what their concept is regarding national defense. As you know, Japan and Taiwan does not have any ties. On the other hand, Yonaguni west, there is Taiwan. So there's proximity and they are our neighbors. Yet, however, as I said, there is no official diplomatic ties. That's the nature of the relationship between Japan and Taiwan. I used to be part of the Maritime Self-Defense Force. There was no exchange or contact whatsoever. On the other hand, with China, there was Japan-China exchange. Sasakawa Peace Foundation has the Japan-China exchange. I went to study with the People Liberation Academy, and I was stationed in China, and I learned what the PLA is all about, and I think I do have a certain understanding on the mindset of the officers of the PLA, but I know nothing about the Taiwan forces. That's a problem. Right. I am a person who's studying China, and even an expert on China has no knowledge on China. It may be that if I talk to the ordinary officers of the SDF, they have no knowledge of Taiwan, maybe. And further, the audience who are viewing this video, who are ordinary civilians living in Japan, what is the Taiwan Defense Forces? I know nothing. So, for the time being, China Observer will place focus on Taiwan to continue with our analysis, share expertise with you, and engage in discussions. Professor Momma's article is already uploaded on the website. CSPA Toshi Yoshihara, who is with CSPA, he is an expert on Chinese forces and Taiwan forces. He is well known for his research in these areas based in the United States. From the Chinese perspective, Taiwan's strategic value. For China, what kind of strategic value does Taiwan have? That is the theme of his article that's been uploaded on China Observer. So we'd appreciate if you could take a look and read that article as well. Thank you to the audience, and thank you.